Well, Paul, for Manchester boxing fans, this weekend is absolutely massive. On Friday night, Anthony $1 Million Crolla travels to Los Angeles to take on the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Vasyl Lomachenko. And before we get into the matchup, how much credit does Crolla deserve just for taking the fight?
Oh, a tremendous amount of credit. He's never shirked anybody in his career, Anthony, and if you've seen him recently and looked at the shape he's in, he's prepared for this one. He really has, and it's credit to him as well. He's 32 years of age now. I won't say he's coming towards he's in the back end of his career, but he's had some bruising contests, and he's never shirked anybody. He's always took the fights and took it with a smile on his face as well. He's a credit to the sport, and you know, I think he went over last Wednesday to get acclimatised, so he's been over there for just short of a week now, I think, and he's been in the Wildcard gym, I believe, doing his training over there and travelling about and taking in the sights, and I'm sure he'll be ready come Friday night.
Yeah, Vasyl Lomachenko is a two-time Olympic gold medalist and multiple weight world champion. But what is it about him that makes him so tough to beat? Where do you start with him? He's quick. He's going to be very hard to outwork. I mean, if you go back through Anthony's career, he's not known as a big knockout puncher. But what Anthony does bring to the table is he's a fantastic work rate. You know, he'll outwork anybody. But Lomachenko might be difficult to outwork because he throws that many punches. He's very strong. His body shots are fantastic. His speed, he can hit with both hands, you know, with a similar amount of power. He's the ultimate sort of pound-for-pound fighter, really, and many people believe he's the best fighter in the world. You know, if you look at his amateur career, how many fights he had in his amateur career? I mean, his pro career has been pretty short, really. I think it's 13 fights, is it? Whereas Anthony's going into fight number 44, I think. This is a 45, so it's a tale of two totally different boxers, really, and how their styles match is going to be really intriguing come the night. Yeah, Anthony Crolla is one of the most well-loved and supported fighters in the country. Whenever you go to the Manchester Arena, the chants of "Oh, Anthony Crolla" ripple through the Manchester Arena. Do you think this is something that maybe, you know, if the Manchester fans have travelled over to Los Angeles, maybe it'll feel like Old Trafford and maybe Lomachenko will be a tad bit intimidated?
Yeah, I think the fans are going. I don't know how many are going. I did hear a number today. I can't remember what it was now, but I think they are travelling in numbers. And they always do travel and follow Anthony. I mean, if you could get anything like a Ricky Hatton sort of following, that will give him a real lift. But no, I think he'll be ready. I think he's one of those fighters who lives off the crowd and that. But I think with this challenge, I think this challenge is slightly different. He's going over there as an underdog, but I think. What's the word I'm looking for? I think the prize at the end of this one is so big if he can topple Lomachenko. I think it'd be one of the biggest wins for a British boxer of all time. There's been some great wins over the years, hasn't it, for our boxers in this country. But I think this one, away from home, it'd be a massive upset, but it'd be a great win.
Yeah, I think on behalf of myself and you, I think we both love Anthony Crolla. I think the whole of Manchester and the whole of England loves him, and we're wishing him all the best this weekend out in Los Angeles. Anyway, moving on to the heavyweight division, coming off his win against Tony Bellew, Alexander Usyk is moving up to heavyweight, and he's going to be debuting May 25th against Carlos Takam. Do you think this will be a stern test for the Ukrainian?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a tough test for any boxer when they move up weights. You know, he's a totally different mindset from him, isn't it? You talk about different speeds and different powers as well, so he's going to have that to contend with. But I think with Usyk, you saw against Bellew in some of his other fights, he doesn't seem to be fazed by any of this, and he's another one like Lomachenko. The different boxers, they're at a different level, aren't they? He's at that sort of elite level in the world, and you know, Takam's a tough fighter, and he's going to test him, but I can only see one winner. That should be fascinating, though. It really should, because when we look back at the Tony Bellew fight, Tony Bellew wasn't really the biggest sort of cruiserweight in the world, was he, coming up from light heavyweight? So the size thing, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference, really, because he's not saying, in his interview, he's not been talking about the size, he's been talking about the skill. And he's going to bring that to the heavyweight division, and it's going to be fascinating to see. And if he can get through this fight, look how good the division is at the moment with the likes of Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, just to name a few. It is a fascinating division, and if he can get somebody else into the mix as well, there's going to be some absolute wonder fights coming up in the next few months and the next year or so.
Yeah.
Assuming he comes through this test against Carlos Takam, he'll be right into the mix with AJ, as you've said. It'll be the WBO mandatory. Do you think he'll be ready for that test straight away, or do you think he needs a couple of warm-ups before he goes in against Anthony Joshua?
That's a difficult question. It's like I said before, with guys like him, they are these elite level fighters, aren't they? And I think he is a different animal. I wouldn't like to put my money on that fight. If he was to fight Anthony Joshua tomorrow, I wouldn't be too sure, but I don't think he'd need too many warm-up fights because the skill he's got. You look at the way he dispatched Tony Bellew, and Tony Bellew's no mug. He's a strong local, heavy puncher. Really, with no disrespect to Tony Bellew, he was like a man against a boy, really, wasn't it? So he is. I mean, if I was Anthony Joshua, I don't know whether I'd be worried about him, but you'd be very wary. You'd be very, very wary of his power and the speed that he's going to possess as well. I can't see him weighing anywhere near sort of 17, 18 stone. He's probably going to be around the 15, maybe 16 stone mark, even if that. So I don't think it'd take him long to get up to that level that Anthony Joshua was at. And what a mouth-watering fight that would be. Where would you have that? Would it be Wembley Stadium? Would you be able to get a stadium big enough for it? It's going to make fascinating viewing when it does happen, because I'm sure these fights will happen.
Yeah, last week I think we mentioned that Paulie Malinaggi had signed up to compete in bare-knuckle boxing. His opponent, Artem Lobov, won his fight at the weekend and confirmed that those two will be dancing against each other on June 22nd. Of course, there's this huge background with Artem being teammates with Conor McGregor. I think Paulie Malinaggi actually slapped him at a media day this weekend. Are you eager for this fight, Paul? Are you looking forward to it? And also, what's your opinion on bare-knuckle boxing as a sport? I mean, I've heard a lot of controversy that it's a little bit too brutal.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. To be honest with you, when I did one of my fights last year at Bowler's Exhibition Centre, I walked in and there were some people there that night who were doing bare-knuckle boxing. I didn't realise when I first walked in. I thought, oh my God, are these the people on the same bill as me? It's a totally different aspect. And going back to your question there, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know whether I'll be able to watch it. I've never watched bare-knuckle boxing before. It just sounds a bit brutal, doesn't it? And does Paulie Malinaggi know what he's letting himself in for? I mean, he's a tough bloke, isn't he? He's been in some great fights and had a great career as well, so he's a hardened athlete. But it's a totally different sport to boxing. So I don't know about that one. And the age he's at now, I mean, you're asking a lot of your body, aren't you? And the hammer that you're going to take on your head as well through that, I don't know, because when you've got boxers boxing in 10-ounce gloves, 10-ounce gloves hurt, but, a bare knuckle is going to do a lot more damage. So I don't know. I might have to watch that one from behind the couch, I think.
Yeah, last boxing question of the day for you, Paul. Out in America, Clarissa Shields and Christina Hammer are competing for all 5 belts in the women's division. Showtime have massively got behind this fight. It's fantastic to see women get a huge platform to compete on.
It certainly is, and we've got quite a lot of women boxing at the moment. I mean, you've only got to see Katie Taylor, the entertainment she's given us, and I know Natasha Jonas was on the bill just a few weeks ago at Liverpool as well, and there's been some great fights just recently, and this one here, I'm really looking forward to it. It should be a great fight. I mean, 2 fighters who are very, very confident going into it, and it should be an excellent fight to watch. I know Shields is claiming she's the greatest fighter of all time, greatest women's fighter of all time, and she thinks she can prove that by beating Christina Hammer, so we will have to wait and see on that one. But I'm sure Katie Taylor will have something to say about that.
Well, as usual, Paul, thank you for joining us on the Sportszone. Next week, we're going to be talking all about Amir Khan against Terence Crawford and Dave Allen versus Lucas Brown. But next up on the Sportszone, we've got the UFC.
I'm Wes Brown and I listen to Salford City Radio.
Well, James, it's UFC 236 at the weekend, and the headline event will be Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier for the UFC interim lightweight title. Of course, the main title is held by Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I think this is a very exciting contest to establish who will be that number 1 contender.
Absolutely. Who's your money on? I think I've got back Holloway in this one.
I have got back.
Very exciting fighter.
Absolutely,
very exciting.
They've both been on incredible runs, and what's interesting is that both these men were at featherweight and are now moving up to lightweight. Both had losses against Conor McGregor and have since then come on leaps and bounds in their career.
Absolutely.
Of course, these men have met before, and Dustin Poirier came away the victor, but Max Holloway's just been excellent in his last few fights. I mean, just before the show started, we were talking about his victory against Brian Ortega.
Oh, what a fight.
And how impressive he looked at that point. Do you think Max could be a potential superstar in this sport? I mean, he's looking unbeatable at the moment.
He is looking unbeatable, and I think we toss that word around a lot because in fighting we know that anything can happen. One good punch and the top of the food chain falls to the bottom like that. But I think with Holloway, he's a great counter-puncher. I think he works his opponents out very quickly into the fight. I think he does a lot of homework. I think he always does his homework. And when he steps into the octagon, I feel like he's in charge. I don't get that from certain fighters. He steps in, and I know they've all got bravado and they've all got an image to uphold, but genuinely I see it in him. He's worked his opponents out before they've even landed a punch, and that's why I got to back him in this fight. Are you going the same way?
Yeah, if I was to pick, I would go with Max Holloway. I think his striking game's just too good, and I think he's going to be a bit too rangy for Poirier.
It's funny because Poirier obviously did win the last one, and he's not exactly on a bad run, but again, Holloway just seems, that word, unbeatable at the minute. Absolutely unbeatable.
Yeah, we said that. Do you think we're overlooking Dustin Poirier a tiny bit? I mean, Max Holloway has reached the mountaintop already. He's already become a UFC world champion. Dustin Poirier is yet to do that. And can we underestimate a man who's still hungry for the strap?
Yeah, as The Rock said, once you've been hungry, you're never full. So I think, there's always that twinkle in the eye of the challenger, isn't there? They see the belt and they want it. But when it's that level, and you've got fighters of this quality, you've got to go with your gut. And I think he's a beautiful counter striker. I think he'll outwork, overpower, and just overcalculate his opponent. I think he's just such a smarter fighter. So that's why I got to go with Holloway.
Yeah, and of course the man who will be watching with ease at the weekend will be Khabib Nurmagomedov. Of course, he's the champion. Which one of these two men do you think can give him a harder contest?
After watching that McGregor fight, it's actually hard to say any. I think Poirier's game on the floor, I think, is probably stronger than Holloway's, but it's tight. It's very tight. I think both of them are kind of strikers, aren't they? And then there's the old saying: if you put any striker in the world versus the best grappler in the world, the grappler will always come out on top. If Khabib can get any fighter to the deck, any fighter, Anthony Joshua, anyone, Muhammad Ali, anyone, if he gets them to the floor, it's good night, lights out. But we'll see. I'm sure I'll be watching with eager eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's also been in the news recently involving Khabib and his ex-opponent Conor McGregor. I think we all have a bit of trash talk in the build-up, but when do things go too far? Over social media this week, Conor McGregor posted a racist remark in regards to Khabib Nurmagomedov's wife. Khabib responded by bringing up a criminal investigation which is surrounding the Irishman at the moment. If these two men were to rematch, there's so much racial tension going into this. Do you think it's just dangerous what these two men are doing now?
Yeah, I don't think it's good for the sport. I don't think it's good for society in general. I think you said it. I think it's actually dangerous. If they fight again, that it could spark war. It could spark at least conflict. It's a real tough one because obviously you got such a spectacle like you do with the Conor McGregor show, and it was brilliant to watch. But what we said after that fight was the things that followed afterwards, the trash talking, the fight after the fight, and everything else in between with talks of people's family and religion. Where is the line? When does it go too far? I know these men are going to fight to bout in the octagon and they'll meet and they'll fight, but when does trash talking not become about the fight anymore? Because you saw it with Mayweather. When he went over to boxing, and that was Conor McGregor trash talking at his best, taking the mick, taking the apps, like walking into Las Vegas and Dublin like he owns both equally. But with the Khabib and McGregor fight, it just I think it did go too far. When you mention politics, religion, people's family, I think that's where you got to draw the line. So I don't think, don't get me wrong, I think Conor McGregor is one of the best things that's happened to UFC, but I don't think him versus Khabib would be a good idea for the sport and society in general, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the co-main event, we've got a clash for the UFC interim middleweight title between Kelvin Gastelum and Israel Adesanya. And before we talk about this match is what it is, let's talk a bit about Adesanya. I know you're a huge fan.
Huge fan.
He's being billed as this future superstar. He fights a lot like Anderson Silva. He can talk, he can walk the walk. Do you think he's the real deal?
I think he is. I think he's the absolute Real Madrid real deal. But I love look at him and I see, don't you just see a champion, calm, like you said, like Anderson Silva, steps in the octagon, calm, cool, collected. Again, another fighter who just slowly picks apart his opponent, picks his punches, waits for his moment, and I think he's absolutely incredible to watch. He's a show. He's an absolute show when he fights.
Now, the man in the opposite corner, who a lot of people seem to be writing off, is Kelvin Gastelum, but people are forgetting, this man hits like a train. He has victories over Jacare Souza and Michael Bisping. Do you think he's going to throw a spanner in the works this weekend?
Possibly. We know how much you love Michael Bisping, but I think if the two fighters fully try and slug it out, then Adesanya will lose. I think if it just becomes an absolute almost grudge match, if you will, where they don't even try and defend. But I don't think Adesanya fights like that, and that's why I got to back him. I think he's smart. I think he knows that hit for hit, punch for punch, he'd probably lose out eventually. But he's more acrobatic, he's cleverer, he's more agile. I think his defence is a lot better. I think if he waits for his moment, like he has done in his previous fights, puts on a show, I think there can only be one winner. I know a lot of people are writing the opponent off, but I got to back Adesanya. He's incredible.
Yeah, last UFC question of the day. Of course, if Adesanya does get through this, then he'll have a meeting with Robert Whittaker. Of course, Robert is the world champion. He's Australian. Israel Adesanya is based in New Zealand. It'll be a huge trans-Tasman rivalry, probably at a stadium, about 100,000 people in Sydney. What a huge event that would be.
Absolutely. We talk about like adverts for the sport, and obviously we were just saying with McGregor and Khabib, they're trash talking, even though it was such a spectacle and it probably brought lots of money to the UFC. It probably shined a bad light on it as well. This is the example of a fight that shines such a good light on the UFC, shows what it can be. I like to talk about the theatrics of fighting and the pantomime aspect, because that's what it is. You are here for a show, and I think if these two meet, it will just be, it will go down in history as one of the biggest fights in UFC. Who you backing if it does happen, which I think it will.
I think Robert Whittaker, I think he's excellent. I think he's nailed every aspect of mixed martial arts down to a T. He's finding a way to beat anybody. But he did get beat by Stephen Thompson, who's an elite kickboxer. Israel Adesanya is an elite kickboxer, so if you're trying to make a case for him, that would be it. It's certainly an interesting one, and that's all your UFC fill for this week. Moving on next, we're going Wrestlemania for the wrestling.
I'm Wes Brown and I listen to Salford City Radio.
Big weekend, wasn't it, James? Big weekend. Who we got first then? Let's have a look. Ronda Rousey. We were actually talking about her before the show. She was obviously in the UFC. Why did she go to WrestleMania?
Why did she go to WrestleMania?
Because she kept on losing.
Yeah, essentially, she lost 2 fights in the UFC back-to-back. She struggled badly after those losses. Some would say she dealt with it in the wrong way. She refused to do media. She didn't want to acknowledge it in interviews. And I think overall that pushed her away from the UFC. In wrestling, she sort of has an avenue where she can always avoid being embarrassed. And that's sort of how she's done this. But she's got to headline WrestleMania, which in itself is amazing.
Yes, she fought Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. How did it go down, James?
Yeah, well, of course, Charlotte Flair's the most successful woman maybe in history, but Becky Lynch, the Irish woman, who's developed this incredible cult following just over the last 6 months, and unbelievably, she's become the biggest star in the sport in an incredibly quick period of time. The whole of the WWE universe is massively behind her. And as this fight came to fruition and top main at WrestleMania, the first ever women's main event, which is just incredible in itself, the 3 men went to war, and it was Becky Lynch that came out victorious, and it was absolutely sensational for the country of Ireland and for women.
There goes Ronda losing again, eh? Also, we got Daniel Bryan versus Kofi Kingston. What happened there?
Yeah, Kofi Kingston's a man who's been in the company for 11 years, and he's won the Intercontinental title, he'd won the USA belt, but he'd never quite reached the pinnacle of the sport. He's a man I supported when I was very young. He's absolutely brilliant. It was fantastic to finally see years and years and years of hard work pay off, and he finally has that WWE belt around his waist.
Now, the biggest fight of the card. It's got to be. Even I heard about this, and it was Triple H versus Batista. 2 absolute legends of the game, icons, faces of the sport. Tell us what happened. Even I know what happened with was it an earring?
Oh, it was
the nose ring. It was a nose ring.
Yeah, it was. It goes without saying, these 2 men are 2 of the biggest names in the sport. Full stop. Period. Absolutely huge names. Anybody throughout the world knows these 2 men. They met in the ring, and I tell you what, it was a no-holds-barred match, and there really was no hold bars. Triple H ripped Batista's nose out with pliers. It was brutal. It was horrible. Both men went through tables. They both took a serious hiding. Sledgehammers were involved, but it was Triple H who ended up winning the match and continues his WWE career.
Last one for you. I'll go with AJ Styles and our guy Randy Orton. Even I was a fan of Randy Orton as a kid. Surprised he's still going.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy's getting on a bit now. He's been around for a very long time, and I've always felt that he's the most talented man in the sport. His RKO out of nowhere is certainly a brutal move, isn't it? That's anonymous throughout the world. Everybody knows about it. But unfortunately, he lost this weekend to AJ Styles. He's sort of the new guy coming through. But Randy, I feel he's always a win or two away from a world title shot, and I don't think we're too far off seeing him as world champion once again.
Great stuff. That's all we got for WrestleMania here on the Sportszone. Coming up next, it's the darts.
I'm Wes Brown and I listen to Salford City Radio.
Yeah, we've got all the darts talk now on Sportszone on Salford City Radio, and it was a great opening night for Phase 2. Mensah Suljovic beat James Wade 8-6 in the opening game of the night. What do you think of that one, James?
Well, I think Mensah Suljovic is a lad we're talking about for the last few weeks. He's just brilliantly consistent. If he loses, he won't lose badly, and then every now and again he's always going to nick that win, which makes him such a dangerous player in this points format tournament. I think the more he plays, the better he gets, and I think it's likely that he's going to that top 4 now.
And if we're being realistic, do we think James Wade will be in that top 4 as well, or are the wheels slowly falling off the Wade train?
Because James Wade is all over the place, isn't he, mentally? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but sometimes he'll be on incredible form and then he'll just slope off. For now, he's still officially in that top 4, but Gurney, Price, Wright are all the win or two away from taking him over. It's certainly going to be interesting. There's still a lot of time left to go.
And there was another huge game as well in Stage 2. Rob Cross defeated Daryl Gurney 8-4 in what will prove to be a really important win for Rob Cross and probably quite a costly loss for Daryl Gurney. Do we think Daryl Gurney will just miss out now, or is he still a chance to be in the finals night?
Well, Daryl Gurney's still level on points with James Wade, so it's definitely all to play for. As for Rob Cross, I think he's really setting himself aside as the leader of this Premier League. He's now a point clear of MVG, and all the criticism that he got after the World Championship last year that he's a one-shot wonder, that's definitely not the case. He's proving now that week in, week out, he can beat the big boys and he can top a Premier League. I think this is going to be vital for Rob Cross's confidence.
And we've talked so much over the last few weeks about, how well Rob Cross has done and how great his form has been. Is he proving slowly that he might be the favourite, or is it still MVG irrespective of the form?
Oh, it's a difficult one. It takes a bold man to say anybody other than MVG is the favourite, but I might do just that. Rob Cross has been brilliant week in, week out, and MVG's been losing the odd game here and there. I think right now, Rob Cross is the favourite for this tournament.
Yeah, and one of the big games last week was MVG and Gerwyn Price, two players who have been in tremendous form at different stages of the season. Gerwyn Price at one time we thought would definitely be there on finals night, and he's just tapered off over the last few weeks. They drew 7-all. Disappointing for Michael van Gerwen?
I think it's more disappointing for Gerwyn Price, actually, because I think he was up by 5 legs and MVG had to claw his way back into the game. So Gerwyn Price will be living, because if he had have won that game, he would have been in that number 4 place. He would have had a place booked at the O2. But alas, it's not to be, and MVG needed that, or he would have been 2 points down against Rob Cross.
Yeah, and what have we got lined up next week, James? Some big games coming up, I know.
Absolutely, there is. Rob Cross takes on Peter Wright. That's an interesting one. I mean, Snakebite needs a win desperately. He's just sloped off over the past few weeks. Wardy, do you see Snakebite, mate, in the L2? Do you think he's still got a chance?
Tough to say. You're having the debate there on who's the actual favourite for the whole competition, and I just don't know. It's too hard to settle. I think you just got to back MVG really all the way, or Rob Cross. But we'll see who makes it to the O2 in just a couple of weeks.
Then Gerwyn Price, Mensah Suljovic. It's certainly an interesting one. Gerwyn Price will definitely want a big win after a terrible, more near defeat to MVG when he was way up. I think that Mensah Suljovic has just been playing so brilliantly that you have to make him the favourite. But Matt, do you think Gerwyn Price's passion can get him through this one?
He can. We've seen it so many times over the course of the season that he's not looked great. He's not been the favourite. You've not thought he'll go on and win the game. But then he maybe hits a 180 or a big checkout, and all of a sudden the crowd erupts and he erupts, and he just carries himself all the way through. So even though he is 1 point behind the top 4, I wouldn't write him off, even though he's not been in great form recently as well. I still think Price and Wade are the two second favourites to finish in the top 4. What do you think, James?
I think so. You'd have to make those two the most likely. I want to believe in Peter Wright. I love him, and I think that he's just still one of the best players in the world when he's on his game. He's sloped off the past year or so, but the man's been in so many major finals that you want to see him cross that line eventually. Will he ever do that? I'm not sure. James, do you see him ever winning a big major tournament on Sky Sports?
You'd like to, wouldn't you? Because he's been in the game for absolutely years, but it's the ticking clock, and it's not just darts players, it's every athlete, especially in a sport that is individual like darts. He's been to a lot of finals, and I think if he doesn't cross the line soon, he will be thinking about hanging. What's the term for retiring from darts? Obviously, you got hanging up the boots or hanging up the gloves. What do you hang up in darts?
The arrows.
The arrows, the flies? I don't know.
Anyway, a game that's absolutely vital for the Premier League. It's 4th and 5th. James Wade versus Daryl Gurney. A win for either man will put them in the top 4. Matt, which way do you see this one going?
It's just so hard to call.
Big game.
I think it just depends who turns up on the day. Daryl Gurney has been the definition of inconsistent along with Smith this season. So I think if you get the best out of Gurney on the day, I think Gurney wins it time and time again. But James Wade is Mr. Consistent, so it's tough to call, and I think it depends who turns up on the day.
Yeah, last game this Thursday in Liverpool will be Michael Smith versus Michael Van Gerwen. It's a rematch of last year's final. Of course, Michael Smith hasn't been as good as he was last year. He's bottom of the table right now. He's on 8 points, and if he doesn't get a victory, he's in serious trouble. Do you think that pressure can bring the best out of him, or Wardy, do you think he's going to be in serious trouble? Do you think he's out of the Premier League if he doesn't win?
Well, it's hard to say, because obviously last year he had such a great year, and this is the thing with a sport like darts. Like you said, Matt, it's all on the day. It's all on the day. You can train and train and train, and then you get up there and your head is just not in the right place. But I think if he doesn't sort his act out soon, then he will be dropping out, and MVG isn't a good one to bring it back against. But if you do it against him, because I think darts is very much a mental and momentum game, if you bring it back against a player like MVG, well, then there's nothing to say that you can't storm it and keep going.
That's all our darts talk on Sportszone today. Up next, we've got the football.
I'm Wes Brown and I listen to Salford City Radio.
Yeah, right, we're back with the football. Maidstone United and Salford City we're going to start off on. Salford won 2-0. Adam Rooney, who's just come back from injury, scored both goals, proving to be a really crucial player to have back in this late run. And they've actually gone top of the league against what we might have thought a few weeks ago. They've gone top of the league, 1 point in front of Leyton Orient, have a game in hand. Really great stuff from Salford, hasn't it been, James?
Crunch time, absolute crunch time. I think you're absolutely right. Adam Rooney's a massively important player to that team. I think they deserve the win. What is that, like 4 clean sheets on the bounce? I don't think they're all victories, but I think it's like 4 or 5 clean sheets on the bounce, which is just absolutely amazing.
Well, they conceded last week to Bromley, but before that I think it was 7 clean sheets on the bounce. So it's
madness.
8 out of 9 games clean sheets, I'm pretty sure. So the defence has been a real staple in this team over the last few weeks, and their improvement. Wouldn't you agree? I
think I speak for the whole of Salford when I back them to win the league. I mean, I know they got that game out of hand, but again, it's Leyton Orient, isn't it? But I think if you're a guy in Salford right now talking about Salford Sport, how can you not back them to win the league? It's the fairy tale story. They've had an absolute roller coaster of a season. Rooney is back, Salford are back, and I see him going all the way.
Yeah, and it's definitely something to be getting excited about. Leyton Orient in 2 weeks' time plays Solihull Moors, who are in 3rd place. A draw there, and if we assume Salford have a perfect finish to the season, Salford will go on and win the league. Can they do it, James, do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely believe they can. I remember in October when I first started on this show, we were talking about the possibility of Salford winning the league, and it looked a real possibility. Since then, they sloped off a bit. But as I said a few weeks back, they've hit home at the perfect part of the season, and I really believe that they can do it. There feels like there's a special atmosphere in Salford at the moment. The whole city's sort of getting behind them. I really believe they can do it. Matt, you're a huge Salford FC fan. Hand on heart, do Salford win the league this year?
It's just so tough to call. I mean,
of course they do.
Last week when they beat Bromley with those 2 late goals, they was ecstatic. The atmosphere was unbelievable. But I don't think it actually entered anyone's mind, even though they went into second, that they could still potentially win the league, because Leyton Orient were in such a strong position. But with Leyton Orient drawing and Salford picking up a win against Maidstone, it's now become a possibility. So I think we just keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully they can keep this great run on, and then if they do that, it's definitely possible. But I think 1st or 2nd place, either one is secured for Salford now at this point. Another game that's just been was Wolves and United. I remember saying in the build-up to the show that I didn't think United were favourites, despite the value and despite how much of a better team United have got. Wolves went on and won 2-1. What did we think of that?
Credit to Wolves, absolute credit to Wolves. Obviously, they were in the FA Cup semi-final on the weekend, which I thought they were unlucky to lose against Watford. But even though United, I think, dominated parts of the game, especially early on, Wolves just took their chances, man. And I think it's an absolute credit to their team. They play like a wolf pack, you know what I mean? They play as a team. They've come up. They've absolutely stormed the Prem. They're in 7th, the Europa League spot potentially. And I think they deserve the win against United. I think they really did. United have found themselves a new bogey team.
And is it the case of sort of a tactical masterclass from Nuno Espirito, or is it more of a mental block on United's side? Because that's 3 games now and United are still without a win against Wolves. Wolves do like to sit back and it stops United from counter-attacking. Is it tactics or is it just an issue with United's side?
Well, styles do make football games, that's definitely the case, but I think there's a serious block on Manchester United's mental side. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had such a good run for not a long period of time, but it felt like that. It felt it was a real energy in the city, and obviously that was going to come to an end. We're now sort of cooling off, and the results are going against us, but I think we're going to snap back into form soon enough. Wolves 2-1. I know McTominay bagged early and it looked like we were going to snap this spell, but unfortunately it wasn't to be, and every credit to Wolves. I think they're a far better side than they're given credit for.
Yeah, and so that's another game that was just gone at the weekend was the other FA Cup semi-final. City beat Brighton 1-0. It was meant to be a dull game. It didn't really live up to expectations of an FA Cup semi-final, but City roll on. The quadruple is still possible, and they've got Watford in the final. Do we think City will go on and win the FA Cup, Wardy?
It's the FA Cup. Anything can happen. We've seen it done before in tougher circumstances, but I think every man and his dog will be back in Manchester City. I think you'd be a fool not to back Manchester City. This is probably the greatest Premier League side we've ever seen, with one of, if not the greatest Premier League manager we've ever seen, if not manager all in all. So to say that City aren't the favourites would be an absolute lie. But like I said earlier, this is the FA Cup. This is the cup of upsets. This is where teams like Watford can do it in the final. We've seen Wigan did it against City the year they went down. Stranger things have happened. As a fan of Manchester football in general, I would like to see City win because they probably deserve it more. But like I said, this is the FA Cup. Upsets happen. Stranger things have happened. Let's see what Watford do in the final, eh?
And obviously City play Tottenham Hotspur tonight at Tottenham Hotspur's new ground.
Big game.
Champions League clash, a huge game.
Big game.
We've got the team news for you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Lining up for Tottenham Hotspur today, we've got Lloris, Trippier, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Rose, Sissoko, Winks, Ericsson, Dele, Sod and Kane. And lining up for Manchester City, Ederson, Walker, Laporte, Otamendi, Delph, Fernandinho, Gundogan, Silva, Mahrez, Sterling, Aguero, Wardy. Based off those two teams, who wins tonight?
Well, it's a tough one because we've got two teams here that are both very good in their own right, but have little to no experience in the Champions League, especially with the managers they have and the teams they have. I think you're looking at two of the most complete teams in English football right now, as in strength and depth. But with the new stadium and the momentum, and maybe I think Tottenham have been on a bit of a dry spell recently in the victories. They've bottled it once again. But I think they'll be into this game wanting it a lot more. And I think in the Champions League, like the darts, like most things, it comes down to the day. And I know it's some absolute cheesy cliche Sunday League talk, but who wants it more? I'm going to back Tottenham tonight. But I'll give City that away goal, which makes all the difference.
And you touched on it there, Wardy, the new stadium. I think it's only their second game in the new stadium.
Yeah, they've only played Palace.
Does that play a factor into it tonight, James?
Absolutely, of course. I know they're only a game in. They're all beaten so far, aren't they?
Yeah, 100% record. 100% record.
Similar to Sam Allardyce's England record. But Tottenham, I do think they can win tonight. Somebody's got to offset this Manchester City quadruple. I mean,
haven't they?
I know, but
or is it written in history, James?
No, it's absolutely not written in
history.
history.
They're what? 12 games away, less.
Yeah.
They play 8 games this month. It's a massive month for football.
I think Tottenham Hotspur are going to tear up the script tonight and get a victory. I really do.
Yeah, well, it'd be. I personally think it would be a huge upset if they do. I think when City drew Spurs, City were pleased with it.
Oh, more than pleased.
I don't think Spurs were too pleased with that draw. Another team who wouldn't have been pleased with the draw was United. They drew Barcelona, which is a huge clash tomorrow night. How do we see that one going, Wardy?
Oh, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough. Do I listen to my head or my heart?
or Messi? Do you listen to
Or do I listen to Lionel Messi as he tears up Old Trafford? It's a tough one. I mean, I think I have this Barcelona team down to win. I think what I said at the start was a Juventus-Barca final, and I still think that's what we'll get. I still think it's what we'll get.
But we've seen United do it in arguably two of the hardest places to go away in Europe.
Yep.
They beat Juventus away and PSG away. It's definitely in this United squad. They definitely have it within them with the players that they have. If they show up on the day, is it a possibility, or do we just see Barcelona being too good at this level and at this stage?
Yeah, I think Barcelona are an absolutely great side, and I think it's going to be an honour for all the Manchester United fans to get to see them live at Old Trafford. Matt, something I want to ask you very quickly. Obviously, you're going to be there tomorrow. I know you've seen Lionel Messi play in the past. He's the pioneer of that Barcelona side. A lot of good players, but he's definitely the standout. You said not only is he as good as he looks on TV, but he's even better. What is it like witnessing this man play in person, and is he the greatest sportsman who's ever lived?
It's scary.
Probably, yeah. It's hard to think about, but he's definitely the best footballer ever lived, in my opinion. Watching him live is a different aspect than what you see on TV. He's just really is a magician. He's unbelievable.
Is it true what they say that he, like, for the first couple minutes of games, he just wanders about watching the defence like a lion stalking his prey? Have you heard that?
I've heard people say it.
Messi's never scored a goal in the first or second minute of any game in any competition, club or country. So the stats would back that for that first 2 minutes he just stalks his prey, which is a terrifying thought.
It is really. It's similar to that of like Floyd Mayweather in the early rounds, working people out, seeing what attacks they throw. And Lionel Messi is the same. I mean, you can't say that the man's not a genius. He works out football so beautifully. I mean, he's limited size-wise, but his footballing brain is so incredible. I don't think there'll ever be a man like him in football ever again.
Yeah, he really is a superstar, and we're lucky to be able to watch him at this time, but maybe not so lucky that he's going up against Ashley Young and Chris Smalling.
Oh, gee. Have you heard that? I think it was fake news, but Chris Smalling said he's got a tactic that only he knows to stop Lionel Messi. I don't think he does either.
I believe that Chris Smalling has the antidote of Lionel Messi.
That's all the news we've got for you today on Sportszone. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.